floor over to John and Nancy.
Thank you, Bishop Austin, and good evening, everyone. I'm John Kirkley. I'm the rector at St. James in San Francisco. I'm also a member of Executive Council and have the privilege of serving as chair of the Strategic Vision Committee. And my partner and colleague and becoming a dear friend, Dr. Nancy Weens, is also here, and she'll be available as part of the Q&A tonight. She is serving as the consultant to the process. Our presentation is really going to be in three parts over the course of convention. So tonight, I'm going to be providing a fairly high-level overview of the work of the committee, where we've been and where we're going. Tomorrow, you will hear much more from Bishop Austin and from Dr. Weens about the results of the listening sessions, what we heard from the people of God in our diocese over these past couple of months. And then as part of our reception and reflection and integration of that learning, members of Dispatch of Business have put together a very creative exercise to invite us into deeper connection with one another as we reflect on what we've heard. So those will be kind of the three pieces. So tonight will be the general overview. Tomorrow will be the heart of what many of you are probably most interested in, is to hear what we've learned from one another. So Ellie, can you bring up the slide deck, please? So this is the report of the Strategic Vision Committee. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So what is the SVC? I'm going to use that shorthand since it's easier to say. So the SVC was actually established by Diocesan Executive Council, not yet, last year. It was a part of a larger work of council to develop and staff committees of council to resource the work of council. And part of what we realized is that we needed a dedicated group of people, a space within our governance structure to think about long-term adaptive change and how we can best respond to the opportunities and challenges we face as a diocese, to have a space to think in together and to pray in together about the future. With the election of our new bishop, and based on a very clearly expressed desire in our diocesan profile, we also knew we wanted to co-create with Bishop Austin a strategic vision plan for the diocese, to discern together how God is calling us into the future that God desires for us. And while this is a committee of council, as you will see, it is composed largely of folks who are not members of council, but a wider group of people from around the diocese. And we recognize that as we're continuing to move more deeply into this process, that we need the active participation of the whole diocesan community, really, to be engaged in prayer and discernment with us. And so that's the invitation tonight, is to continue to do this work together. Next slide, please, Ellie. So the vision plan is intended to communicate our shared values and give us an inspired common direction for concrete aims. So it's about both who we are called to be as the people of God in this diocese, our identity and values, and then based on that understanding, what we're called to do. Some areas we already know that the plan will encompass are fostering greater trust and collaboration among congregations, between congregational and diocesan leaders, and between the bishop and clergy. In addition, it will include developing leaders and fostering innovation by recognizing and empowering the wealth of gifts among our clergy and laity in the diocese. And this we know in part because These were concerns that were raised in the diocesan profile and confirmed by the listening process. Next slide, please. So the scope of the plan will really be determined by the work of the Vision Committee in prayerful dialogue with the members of the diocese. So what it will finally entail is a work in progress. If we already knew, but the result would be we wouldn't need to do the work, right? But we have some educated guesses based on the feedback collected in the bishop search process and what we continue to hear from all of you. So congregational development and diocesan governance structures, how we can improve transparency and accountability and mutual resourcing. Relationships among congregations, clearly articulated desire for deeper relationship and working together across a variety of ministry areas. Addressing diversity and our history of racial and economic injustice in our country, in our region, in our church. Creating sustainable systems, making sure we're financially resourced, and that we're prioritizing the ministry areas that we think are most important, and other issues as they arise. We're continuing to learn as we go along. Next slide, please. So Ellie, if you would click on that hyperlink, I will introduce folks to who the members of the SVC are. So Todd Bryant is the rector at St. Timothy's in Danville and is also a member of Executive Council. The Venerable Miguel Bustos is one of our archdeacons. He also serves on the presiding bishop's staff, working in the area of racial justice and reconciliation. Tricia Christensen is a lay leader at Christ Church, Portola Valley. She's also a member of the board of directors of the Episcopal Impact Fund, one of our diocesan institutions. Canon Amy Cook is our canon for formation on our diocesan staff. Felicia DeMond is a longtime lay leader at St. Paul's in San Rafael. Evan Diocarisa is a lay leader at Grace Cathedral and serves on the Cathedral Council. Adam Dormus is a delegate from Good Shepherd Berkeley and a lay preacher and leader at Good Shepherd. The Reverend Laura Eberly is the deacon in charge at St. James Santiago in Oakland. Jacob Moody is a retired United Methodist minister who is also a member at St. Paul's in San Rafael and has an extensive background in nonprofit management and strategic planning. The Reverend Will Scott has served in the diocese for many years in a number of capacities. He's currently a member of Executive Council and is the priest in charge at St. Anselm's in Lafayette. Jocelyn Sadeko is on staff for Formation Ministries at St. Paul's in Burlingame. Debbie Thomas was recently on staff at St. Mark's Palo Alto. She is also a postulant for holy orders in our diocese and a noted writer, spiritual writer, and retreat leader. The Reverend Liz Titchener is the rector at Church of the Resurrection of Pleasant Hill and has previously served on Executive Council. And then the Reverend Dr. Nancy Weens is the consultant of the process. She is a Presbyterian clergywoman, spiritual director, and consultant to individuals and organizations in discernment work. She also hangs out at St. Columba's Inverness. So she's, we kind of claim her as one of ours. Okay, we can go back. Next slide, please.
Who are you, John?
Oh, you all know who I introduced myself up top. I'm also on the committee. Let me say just a word about The committee composition. Members of the committee, again, part were appointed as members of executive council. The others were recruited through a process of conversation with members of council, with the bishop, with some of our regional deans, folks involved in the Vital and Thriving ministry, with the idea that we wanted to get as broad a representative group of folks as we could across a number of demographics and including geography from around the diocese. And it's proven to be a really wonderful group, and I'll say a little more about that later. So when Bishop Austin came on board and began to participate in the co-creation of this process, he had kind of four parameters that he articulated very clearly that we, being members of the committee, I think were very much in agreement with, so no surprises. But one was that we wanted a discernment model rooted in prayerful listening and learning that draws us closer to God's vision for the diocese. So not just a typical kind of corporate model of strategic planning, but one that is suited to the church's life and mission. And realizing that the main partner in this work is God the Holy Spirit. And so we need to make space for that. Second was that the process should foster building the beloved community and healing any experiences of us versus them and moving us toward a we in the diocese. Third, that this process would include building structures that help us to be more connected and effective. And again, that clearly resonates with our profile. And finally, that there's no predetermined outcome. We are discerning God's vision together. Like it or not, Bishop Rios did not come with a ready-made plan in his back pocket. I know sometimes we wish the church would just tell us what to do and have a plan for us, but alas, we are responsible for being co-creators with God in this. And that's what we're trying to do. So next slide, please, Ellie. Now, in terms of the particular model that we are employing, we are blessed to be in the Bay Area with wonderful resources in planning and discernment in the life of the church. One of those treasures is Sister Elizabeth Liebert, who has taught in seminaries here in the Bay Area and has done a lot of consulting and discernment work. She developed a model along with Dr. Waynes and others that is a discernment model adapted for use with organizations. So it's based on the kind of model that individuals may be familiar with, especially from the Ignatian tradition of discernment, but it's been adapted for use in organizations. It's based on a book called The Soul of Discernment, a spiritual practice for communities and institutions. And I'm not going to go into depths here. It's a little over my head and beyond our time frame tonight. But I just wanted to give you a sense that the process begins with noticing and describing the current situation in the system. So that's part of the work that the committee has already begun to undertake. And that was part of the work of the listening process. And then moving into social analysis, doing some research on demographics and history and culture of the organization and its context. The committee has begun to move into that phase already. And there'll be more to come in the next few months that members of the diocese will be involved in that social analysis piece. And then theological reflection and prayer about what we've learned and how we have seen God at work with us. Moving into decision and confirmation, actually developing a plan. And then finally implementing and evaluating. So that's the cycle that we'll be engaged in. It's an iterative process. And it's one that will continue as we live into this vision over time. Next slide, please. Thank you, Ellie. So as many of you know, we began with listening sessions with Bishop Austin so that we could begin to notice and describe together, and so that he could begin to become oriented to us and to our diocese, and we to him. There were really four aims for these sessions. One was listening as a whole body to help all of us be part of nurturing trust and wholeness, and discerning together. For Bishop Austin to have a chance to listen to what is alive in us, both painful and joyful, to get a sense of the pulse of the diocese, for people to begin to experience shared values together, and thus begin to nurture trust with each other, and for Bishop Austin to have a chance to listen to what, that was a piece that got repeated. To begin to inform the work of the committee as well, as we move into the listening, describing phase of the model. Next slide, please, Ellie. So through September and October, early October, we held listening sessions with Executive Council, with diocesan staff, with our diocesan clergy at the annual clergy retreat. And then there were four public sessions for everyone at St. Stephen's Orinda, Nativity San Rafael, St. Ambrose Foster City, and an online Zoom session. We used the Examen prayer to reflect on our experience of consolation and desolation with respect to our diocese. All the sessions provided for Spanish translation interpretation, and the online session also provided for closed captioning. Each session included time for individual reflection, sharing in dyads, and sharing in the larger group. In addition, written responses were submitted in person and online. More than 400 people participated in one or more of these sessions, and more than 300 submitted written responses. And those, the initial themes and needs identified in that feedback will be shared by Bishop Austin and Dr. Weens tomorrow. Next slide, please. So this process of listening is going to continue. And there are three ways immediately that you can continue to participate. One is by going to the DialCal website. Ellie, if you can go ahead and click on that. Here you will find the Examen prayer practice that we used as the basis for discernment about our joys and concerns, our consolations and desolations. You'll find an FAQ document, and these are all in Mandarin, English, Spanish, Tagalog, and Tongan. And then you'll find a feedback form that you can click on to submit your own response to the fruit of your Examen prayer practice. So that website is up and available. I would also commend that as a resource, not just for individuals, but perhaps for congregations who want to use those resources for our collective discernment in this process, and perhaps for your own discernment as a congregation. In addition, there has been an email established, vision@dialcal.org, that is a confidential email that is seen only by Bishop Austin. And so if you have matters that you would are concerned about or happy about, you can send those directly to him, whereas the other feedback will go to the SVC, the Vision Committee. And then finally, Bishop Austin is planning quarterly gatherings in which he will meet with 2 deaneries at a time to continue the process of listening and dialogue together. And that next and initial session will be on Saturday, February the 1st from 10 to noon at St. James Santiago in Oakland. And that'll be for Alameda and Southern Alameda deaneries. We recognize that in this first round of listening sessions, we were not able, just due to scheduling constraints, to get to every deanery in the diocese. So do know that this is going to continue as a practice for the immediate future. Next slide, please, Ellie. Okay. So this gives you a sense of the timeline. June through August of this year, we were recruiting and training members of the SVC. The diocesan listening sessions with Bishop Austin took place in September and October. And the SVC began to do its own work examining diocesan structures. We're now moving into the data gathering and social analysis phase of the cycle as a committee. In January next year, we'll be doing more data gathering, including targeted interviews with different members of the diocese, different constituencies and organizations, to expand and deepen our understanding of the structures in our system. In February and March, we'll begin collating and coding patterns and insights from the research we've done. We've scheduled a March retreat, a day-long discernment retreat for the committee with Bishop Austin to reflect on our learnings. May through July of next year, we'll begin forming the plan, and the July Executive Council retreat will probably be, I imagine, one place where we'll begin to flesh that out and get some feedback. And then we'll be beginning to disseminate and implement more detailed plans beginning in the fall of next year, with a final presentation to diocesan convention expected October 2025. I would caution that this is an ideal timeline. I told Bishop Austin when I first met him that I didn't know that we would be able to, whether or not we'd be able to meet that deadline. It depends entirely on what comes up in the process. Adaptive change can only work at the speed of trust. And so that's the speed at which we are going to do this work. And if we find that there are bumps in the road where we need to do some healing and reconciliation work as a diocese, then we will attend to that. And that will, inform and shape, the final outcomes. And again, it's iterative. Discernment will continue after October 2025 as there's ongoing evaluation and new learning that happens. So this is just getting us started in the common life that we're going to be sharing with Bishop Rios in these next many years, we hope. Next slide, please. Several thank yous I want to call out, especially to our listening session host, the Bishop's Ranch, St. Stephen's in Orinda, Church of the Nativity, St. Ambrose, Foster City, and St. Ambrose Lafayette, who hosted the Executive Council session. The hospitality and joy of the people of this diocese is really incredible. And it has been such a privilege to be able to wander around the diocese in this listening process and to be received so warmly. David Patiño and Gilberto Leon provided Spanish translation for us at all of these sessions. Many thanks to the number of folks who volunteered a great deal of time doing translation work for us, which is really important. Especially Nagalu Fusimalawi, who did the Tongan translations, Reverend Mary Chan Ong, who did the Mandarin translations, Reverend Dr. Pamela Stevens, who did our Spanish translations for us, the Reverend Leonard Oakes and the Reverend Yurick Fernandez, who did the Tagalog translations. Audrey Spinka, who's done the closed captioning for us. Our wonderful diocesan communication information staff who have provided amazing logistical support. Canon Stephanie, Ellie, Canon Amy, and Karen. Of course, Bishop Austin, who has been so graceful and present throughout all these listening sessions. And Canon Sierra as well, who has brought a real spirit of joy and hope and care to our work. And all the amazing members of this committee and our consultant, Nancy. As I have prayed and learned with this group of people, I have been renewed in my own sense of hope for the future of the church, in the quality of their care and their prayerfulness and their wisdom. And it's such a privilege to work with them. And so I thank you for the opportunity to do so. Okay, that's it for me. We're happy to entertain questions. And Nancy, please chime in if anything I've said is wrong.
No, that was fantastic, John. Thank you. The one piece of the aims that got replaced with that duplicate was just the aim for people to experience Bishop Austin's empathic leadership and his presence, and to see firsthand that his intention is to create a strategic vision together.
Friends, in the chat, there's a question. Does the SVC have plans to support the fight against the current global climate crisis?
That is certainly one, I think, of a number of ministry priorities that have been expressed in the course of the listening sessions. And I think in particular, finding ways to collaborate more fully together across congregations to address that and other needs.
Thank you. There are some questions coming in, so I'll continue to read them. A glowing note from Paula Hawthorne saying, an excellent, very clear and important presentation. So thank you, John and Nancy, for that. A question from Rebecca Hayes Estera. What does repair and reconciliation look like?
I'm going to tip that one over to Dr. Wiens, because it's really one of her specialties.
Because I have an answer, right?
Yeah, I think the answer is we don't know, but we're going to find out.
Yeah, so let's see, that was Rebecca. Thank you so much for this question. I think this is one of the big questions that we go in listening for, and the seeds of the answer will come from the seeds of the pain. One of the graces that happens through God's love for us and our being bent toward healing, bent toward reconciliation as human beings, is that inside the pain is the revelation of what the healing will look like. And so we do this listening in order to bring empathic presence and bring companionship, but we also do it to listen for what is the wisdom inside the trauma, is another way to talk about that. So today, if you were following the news, President Biden went to make the first formal apology, presidential apology to Indigenous people for taking their children and putting them in boarding schools, the attempt to erase their entire way of being. And that was the first time after all these decades, even though there's been many written things. So this face of repair is a formal presidential apology. There have been written forms in the past. There have been religious leaders who have made apologies in the past. So the face of apology, repair, reconciliation will look distinct for the community that was harmed. So the fingerprints of the wound is what will give us some guidance about that. And there will be some universal is a big word. There will be some common elements that we might want to try in a variety of settings, but there will also be some particular things that will need to be done. And that's something we're listening for. So if you have hints or ideas about what that looks like, we would love to know. And my email address is I will put that in the chat, and I will also make that available tomorrow in the presentation that Bishop Austin and I will be leading tomorrow.
So I see two questions in the Q&A, one from Stephanie about how will the interviewees be chosen for the data interviews beginning in January? So part of the background for that is that the 14 of us who are serving on the Strategic Vision Committee have each selected out of our own experience a structure within the diocese that we are particularly exploring. So in my case, it's executive council. Another example is mission congregations. Another example is accessibility issues in the diocese, physical and otherwise. So we want to go deeper in what we're learning in those areas that we've already identified just from within our group. But I think the other main criteria for choosing will be our ignorance. It's what we don't know as a team and need to find out about. So that might be diocesan institutions that we need to learn more about. It might mean meeting with members of diocesan staff to learn more about their ministries. It might mean convening some focus groups among different constituencies, like groups within diocese for whom English is not their primary language, etc. So that will be clarified, I think, as we're moving through this social analysis process of the model, and identifying the needs and themes that have emerged from the listening process, which you'll hear more about tomorrow. Those, I think, will be guiding us in terms of who we need to be talking with more. I do not know that the SVC will be able to visit all congregations in 1 year. Leonard Oakes raised a question for the listening, discerning part of healing. But I think what we will be able to do is to convene gatherings as needed of folks in the diocese to attend more deeply to listening and healing together. And I know that Bishop Austin will be attentive to that as he continues with these quarterly gatherings, bringing 2 deaneries together at a time. Sally Bingham, I do not have an answer to your question about who's representing the Episcopal Church at the climate conference this year. Maybe Bishop Austin can respond to that.
Yeah, the presiding bishop-elect is in charge of assembling that team, and I believe is already on that, but I don't have any other details other than that.
Could I speak to Debbie Lowe Skinner's comment? Is this an okay moment, John, to add that?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. Her question has to do with, will we be attending to the pains and the difficulties, as well as the things that the diocese is doing beautifully? And that's exactly why we, one of the many reasons, but we chose the examine prayer, Debbie, is because The examine helps us notice where have we already been experiencing the Holy Spirit among us and moving? Where have we noticed it? Where have we collaborated with it and expanded it and centered it in our lives? And some of the work that I get to do when I'm not working with you all is support couples in the vitality of their lives. And one of the things I talk about with them is how really important it is to have a greater proportion of thank yous and gratitudes than concerns and could we change this? And so my hope, Debbie, is that we're going to keep paying attention to where the Spirit is moving among us that we feel grateful for. And in fact, that's how tomorrow's presentation is going to begin. So thank you for orienting us that way. And I'm completely with you, not only for the psychological research on how couples thrive, but for the spiritual clarity that following the Holy Spirit invites us to be part of this beloved community and where the kingdom is already manifest with us. And then from that place of gratitude and really glory to God, then we'll have greater clarity about where we might take next steps to support if there's repair, when there's repair and reconciliation needed.
I think one of the blessings of this listening process has been just to experience the joy that people share in just being together in the same room and meeting people they don't know, seeing old friends they haven't seen in a while. I think COVID really undermined our sense of connection and community as a wider diocese in ways that we've not yet fully realized. So just the simple act of meeting together has been generative, I think. And I think it's going to continue to bear fruit. I'm just seeing a comment in the chat about, oh, yes, not assuming that people who speak the same language are homogenous. Thank you very much. I think it's from Marta Alvarez. That should be obvious to us, right? I mean, English speakers know that. Just because you speak English doesn't mean we're all alike. We all have different backgrounds and cultural affinities and formative experiences. And that's true in other communities as well, whether it's whatever language they share. And thank you for that reminder.
I see a question about Spanish speakers on the Vision team. My understanding is that Laura Eberly speaks Spanish. I'm unclear. I've not heard Miguel speak Spanish, so I can't speak to that. But I know that as far as I know, Laura does, given her location at Santiago St. James. So I'm hearing they're not Spanish speakers. Okay, I beg your pardon.
Now, Laura Miguel are not fluent. Liz is probably Tishner is probably the best Spanish speaker in the group. Oh, I'm sorry. I will let Miguel speak for himself. And of course, the bishop.
I think one of the things that's worth saying is that we're aware that in trying to get a team together that was both representative of the diocese and also functionally small enough to be able to do work together, that there were going to be parts of our diverse body that were going to feel like we weren't 100% there. I think one of the important things to share is, at least in my early reads in the Diocese of California, there's a great value placed on access and representation. And I actually feel like one of the things that is important, I'm not saying that it isn't. However, I think engagement and the active listening that we're trying to do as a larger body means that those perspectives have to be a part of our vision plan going forward. And so even if the members of the team are maybe not the people that you would have chosen, my hope is that it is at least representative enough of our larger body to be able to do that larger listening together. And we've begun that work so far. So I ask for a little bit of patience in that process, and also trust that we're going to get there. We're going to get there together with God's help.
I would just add that I think one of the things that we knew going into this process, but that it still, at least for me, can be kind of surprising at times, is the extent to which our diocesan leadership does not represent the diversity of the communities that we serve. And that is something to which I know we aspire, but we still have a lot of work to do.
I'd like to go back and just acknowledge that the participants can't see the chat. So I want to just go back and say that Miguel chimed in and said he does speak Spanish. It wasn't clear what we were referring to just a few moments ago. And Laura Eberly says her congregation has taught her a lot, but she's not a fluent Spanish speaker, nor is she culturally Latino. So thank you for reminding us that we need to do a question answer format as we respond.
I am not seeing any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or Nancy. And we can, I know my email information is in the FAQ document that's online. We can also put that in the chat. As well as, so, please let me know if you have questions. And feel free to also direct them to members of the committee who you may know. It really is a privilege to be able to be in conversation with you about our common life and the ways in which God is already at work with us. So don't be afraid to nudge us.
John, would you be willing to put your email in the chat? Some folks are asking for it there, and mine's there, and I can put it in again if anyone. Oh, wow, John, that was very quick. Okay, I don't type that fast, so I think that's all.
I didn't know I had the power to do it, so I'm glad to know. Okay, it's there.
Thank you for the presentation. And for the willingness to answer all the different questions that came in and the thoughts and feedback this evening.